data people might be coming for software engineers there. So I think because if you think about it, like implementation was their biggest moat.
My whole consulting practice revolved around LookML, creating LookML, writing LookML. So very interesting to see how that plays out, what it will do for a semantic layer.
And, Looker's saying, well, we're creating LookML agents. Does that help you think through the problem and actually build the agent you need? No, it's just a way to create an agent. Who cares?
What will be your business model in that world?
My business model. It is building proper agentic frameworks, harnesses, semantic layers to make sure that no matter what business you're running, enterprise, startup, finance, healthcare, it will run consistently, fast, and cheaply.
So, Tony, this year at Google Cloud Next, Google announced LookML agents. Beginning of this year, we had the introduction of the Open Semantic Interchange, an open standard for the semantic layer. So what that would mean is that agents are now coming for our work. So we need to figure out how the data consulting industry is changing. And yeah, it's interesting to see what our thoughts on that are, how we think this is evolving going forward.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very interesting development in the field. And thanks again for inviting me over. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you about the semantic layer for AI and how that translates to the data consulting business and the industry as a whole. I think it's a natural progression from where we have been. So I think it's valuable to take a step back and consider where are we coming from. Everybody knows the modern data stack. It's been coined, I think, 10 plus odd years at this point now. And really it focused on data quality, bringing tons of different data streams into a data warehouse, a data lake, or whatever format was appropriate for the business, taking a whole team of the newly coined analytics engineers and transforming it to a set of data products, usually dashboards, that would then be used to deliver value to the business, whether that is for finance, sales, regulatory, across industry. Now, what I've seen with my clients, and this is something that I've heard from a lot of business owners, is there was a certain ballooning of complexity and turnaround time to deliver insights and values. So what you've seen typically happen is that as the complexity grows dramatically, data teams need longer and longer in their turnaround time to deliver insights to the business. So where something might have been a one-day ask on data asks, it becomes a 3-week project with a lot of scoping, a lot of back and forth, and honestly, a lot of frustrated business users. I mean, you basically have a queue that never ends and keeps piling on, and there's executives deciding, like, do we need data people? What are we getting out of this? And I think there was a lot of shakeup in this in the last few years. It's AI, but also the general industry. We're out of the zero interest rate environment, so companies are a lot more focused on being profitable and have less patience overall for excesses and longer timelines. And I think now with the semantic layer and with agentic data, we have a toolkit that is capable of taking that problem and solving it for a business. And even more so, I would say that executives are they're looking at each other's businesses. They see companies like Lightdash and Omni coming up, and they're saying, why are we not doing this? I see my buddy CEO doing agentic data. And whether you like it or not, that is the expectation. That is what they want. And to some extent, you have to play ball. You can't say, well, we're used to the way we're doing things, and you just got to wait. I think that's a losing strategy if you continue going down that path.
Cool. Hey, so for the people that don't know you yet, you and I, we have been chatting for years. I think we met at a DBT meetup, actually.
Yes, indeed.
That is where we met. And yeah, maybe for the people that listen in and don't know you yet, can you tell me a bit more about Tony, what you have been doing, and yeah, more about you?
Right. So I've been a data consultant now for over 5 years in the fields of life science, medicine, biotech, and finance. And I've been providing solutions for small businesses and enterprises, um, mostly in the data engineering space. So creating these modern data stack platforms and making sure that all this data is compiled so analytics engineers can do something with this data. And I've seen firsthand how my clients that I've been working with for years have changed their demands and how that changes my daily role and the things I do and the ways I deliver value. And nowadays, it has transformed into AI engineering or agentic engineering. And the question is indeed, like, how do we build this infrastructure? I think everyone is sort of in the Wild West here. There is no one with 10 years of experience in AI, and technology is developing incredibly quickly. And there is a lot of hype. There's a lot of excitement. But I think there's a lot of unmet potential still in actually thinking through the different steps of the system and what are we actually trying to achieve here? How are we actually building these products? And I'm seeing there's a lot of demand for this. And to anyone that is interested in going into the data consulting space or has already been around for quite a while, I will tell you one thing. If you can differentiate yourself as a really good executor on agentic frameworks for data, that is a huge differential factor.
So nice. I have a thesis on this, which I call the intelligence allocation stack, which consists out of 4 layers. The data foundation to start with, the semantic layer, then the orchestration layer, and the AI agent can run on top of that. So what is interesting to see is how data consulting should evolve when agents are now potentially taking over the work in the data foundation or in the semantic layer. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a very interesting question. And it's very interesting you bring this up. So I was earlier this year at Data Day Texas in Austin, and I got to see what sort of the pulse of the industry is when it comes to AI and how it relates to data work. And what I've noticed is that in general, there is a lot of anxiety about, oh, I'm going to lose my job. There's going to be no demand for my skills anymore whatsoever. And companies are ranging very widely from companies that are barely adopting AI from safety concerns to a few percentage points of companies that are really trying to stay at the cutting edge. And what I want to say to those people is when you have actually built a couple of these systems in production for actual full-size clients, you will quickly realize your skills are still very, very necessary. If you try to take a data warehouse or a BI platform that a company is building for 5 or 6 years and just slap Claude on it and ask it questions, it's going to be a disaster. Think of something very simple like, hey, what was our profit last year? What do we mean by profit? Do you mean EBITDA? Do we mean free cash flow? What is a definition? And, oftentimes there'll be multiple definitions in a business depending on who's asking. And these are things that are very complicated to tell an agent because if you just give them the SQL code, they don't have this context. It's very difficult to build this. And who has the best context on how to translate business inquiries to insights? It is the analytics engineers and the data engineers. They have been doing this for years. And now I'm seeing the discussion evolve into how do we build a semantic layer or how do we build proper ontologies so the AI actually has the proper context when it needs. And I've seen this myself, with a client that I've helped to implement this. They had a huge stack on Snowflake and Looker. They wanted to move over to a new BI platform and make things more agentic. They had this problem that I described earlier where their data asks were blowing out of proportion. Like it was just not tenable how long it was taking to get things done. And we really had to put in a lot of time to take apart and say, okay, what are all the business domains? What are all the typical questions they're asking? Where can we fetch this metadata, either from the data warehouse, the BI platform itself, talking to these individuals, right? And we had to set up a full semantic layer with verified queries and all to make sure that it even answer the questions properly. When we did the first iteration, it was pretty horrific. We were tracking all the stats, and we could see that people were disengaging very quickly in the business because they just didn't get the right answer. So what do? They go back to data asks and ask somebody, can you take a look at this for me? And then we've kind of noticed that as you do more proper engineering and you spend more time in what are we actually trying to achieve? What are the outcomes we're trying to get to with all the data skills that we've been building over all these years? It improved so much to the point where we actually did see more adoption, and we actually did see business users being able to answer their questions without our intervention. And you might say, well, doesn't that at some point automate your work away? There is always new requirements are coming up, new inquiries. You just get to focus on more high leverage, high quality products, right? Like instead of fielding 100,000 data asks, you can say, what can we take on as a project to create a whole new category of insights in the business? I think it's very similar to what you've seen with Snowflake, Databricks, and the data warehouses in general. I mean, the thought was, well, because things are cheaper to run and easier to run, people will just focus on the cost, and especially, in the higher interest era when companies are focusing on profit, we're going to see lower usage. That's not what happened. What you've seen is because of increased efficiencies, there was more demand from the business and more requirements and more excitement to work. And I think keeping that momentum there as a data professional, no matter what your position is in a business or in the industry or landscape, is going to be crucial to stay relevant and keep companies excited to hire your services.
Mhm. Interesting. So you told me you are writing a book on data consulting. In that regard, what chapter you're writing will age the worst, and what will not age at all?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. What ages? I think it's the execution, right? Obviously, I mean, the way we're doing things is changing so rapidly, and what the business actually needs from an implementation standpoint is changing rapidly. Anything I'll write in there will be irrelevant within maybe a year, maybe 2 months, maybe 1 month. I don't know. Uh, what won't change, which is has always been the case in data, is delivering business value is still the primary concern that you should be worried about. And I think, now that we've had sort of this explosion in the modern data stack, I've seen something very similar in the software world. Let's say in JavaScript, in the front end and back end, there's so much complexity built. There's so much focus on best practices and quality and in making these systems that are technically pristine that we sort of forget what we're doing it for. And I felt like we as an industry have always been a few years behind software in taking some of the practices. We always look up to them and say, wow, that's amazing. We should also do testing. Like, they would have unit tests. We would introduce data tests in DBT. But I think with that, we've also sort of taken some of those excesses as well over time. And I think now that we have the shakeup of how things can be done, it's good from a perspective that it forces us to rethink, okay, maybe we have been doing these things like we have done for 10 years, but maybe there's a better way, and maybe we should change things. There are different expectations. The speed at which businesses deliver value to be delivered is tremendously improved. So I think from an execution standpoint, that is going to be the part that's going to change the most. And obviously, what's a component in that as well is like, who knows what happens with AI pricing in the future? It may be that we'll see that funding gets reduced and AI becomes a lot more expensive. So now we have to focus on AI costs and improving the efficiency of implementation. So I think there's a lot of work there that's still going to move around, the moving pieces. What I don't think is going to change, it's the relationships. At the end of the day, in any business, in any endeavor, and especially in data, it's all about trust. Do I trust this consultant, this data person to deliver me with value that's useful? And that doesn't change. The mechanics of how you convince a person to have respect for you, to like you, to be interested in what you have to offer, and for you to provide empathy to what they're actually needing, that will never change. And in fact, I think it's actually going to be even more valuable to spend the time building these skills, because what we're seeing right now is sort of the AI slopification of everything, the internet, email communications, Slack, even, social media videos. And I think if there was anything that was clear from the early internet boom, is that with an explosion of basically ads at the time and slop, things that people do not care about, there is an increased sort of desire and need for the human aspect of life. And I think that is going to keep increasing in value. And the executives that I'm talking to are very seriously investing when it comes to headcount into those relationships, customer success, sales, all of these things. And it does make you consider, hey, like maybe there might be some other profession or area in the data space that I can provide value in, that's maybe slightly away from full technical work. So yeah.
So I also think you have a very specific example in that case where you have saved the company actual money by migrating their cloud instances to something on premise, a core system. I will not name the vendors because I'm working with a lot of vendors as well, but that is something a vendor would typically not do. It's not in their interest to do that. Can you shine some light on how you as an independent consultant tend to save companies money instead of the vendor trying to push their software and using that relationship to expand their costs even more?
Right, that's a good question. So again, I think the most important thing is that you actually understand what it is they need. And what I think a lot of consultants and frankly companies do wrong is they try to prescribe a certain way of solving a problem, right? They'll have like a tech stack that they're very familiar with and very comfortable with. Let's say it is, you're used to using Terraform and dbt and all this stuff. That's great. These are tools and solutions. But some companies might not want to do this. It might be expensive for this company to introduce certain technologies because they don't have the expertise in-house to maintain it after you're gone. There might be cases where they have already built a lot of stuff on an existing tech stack and they don't want to migrate. It does not provide value to them. So I think that is the first step, is saying, okay, how are they running? And this is harder than you think in practice, because you get better at it the more clients you have worked with and the more code bases you've seen, the more personalities you've seen. But it's always difficult because every company has their own ways of doing things, their own sort of rituals and traditions. Some companies might have a lot of greenfield work, some might have more brownfield work. So I think that, to me, is always the most important thing. Like, given the situation, what is the lever we can pull? And the answer differs tremendously based on the company where that is. A couple example dimensions would be, again, you can do very traditional cost savings, saying, well, we see we're using this service, this platform. How can we make this more lean? And this is where a lot of technical people usually gravitate to, because it is the easiest to define in their terms how that works, right? Because you see a dollar amount that's being spent. If I change these things, there's different dollar amount, and that's it. I will warn you though, don't overfocus on these things, because for a lot of businesses, it might not be the most relevant thing. You have to zoom out and sort of look at the perspective of the sponsors in your business, the CEO, the CTO, CFO. What are the total money streams they're spending? And if you, let's say, even if you reduce, let's say, a multi six-figure contract to a single-digit six-figure number, if this company is spending like tens of millions of dollars on other things, they care, but they don't care as much. Whereas if you build one machine learning model that improves their pricing by 1%, and this saves them $10 million a year, they're listening. And I think that is the key factor to actually provide value. Now, of course, you can't do everything, so you do have to have some specialties. But yeah, I would say like that to me is the most important way in which I approach it. And I don't.
Let me challenge you a bit on that.
Okay.
So we now have the Open Semantic Interchange introduced in January. Snowflake, DBT, relational AI. They took part in this consortium where they introduced this open standard. The concept is define a metric once and you can use it everywhere. But a big part of consulting work used to be transitioning between those different layers, different models, different tools. So that used to be a big part of the consulting work. Do you see that this will change your relationship with the customer in that regard, or is it a threat for your business model?
That's a good question. I guess it makes sense to sort of loop back into what we discussed before about staying stuck in your ways. That is true in the roles in a business as well as consulting. I think the change is tremendous in what you need to do to provide value. That is 100% true. I mean, if a company already has live systems and they don't see a lot of value in sort of re-engineering and reducing costs there, you have to play ball. You have to, produce agentic data analysis, and that's a totally different skill set, right? I mean, we're talking now about a semantic layer. Like that's just something not a lot of people are building, even a couple years ago. We're talking about ontologies, which has been a topic for a long time, but has not been as relevant for most professionals up until recently. Even the AI technologies themselves, there are so many little nooks and crannies that you need to sort of work through to implement it. And what I'm seeing in practice is because it's so young, a lot of companies start implementing AI and they're sometimes even missing the fundamentals, right? I've seen customers where they will have zero optimization when it comes to their tokens. So I'll give you an example. Like you might think, hey, I'm giving a JSON or a markdown to an agent to work it through. Why? This is something I read, but is that the best for the AI agent? Not necessarily. So you have to think about, okay, how do we compress the input in a way that it's usable for the AI and saves us money and also accuracy? Because the more context you have, that more accuracy drops off. Anywhere over 200,000 tokens, usually you'll see reduced implementation. Another very big component of this is MCPs, right? Like people think, oh, we'll just create MCPs, and they think of it like a REST API for agents. That's a very wrong assumption, I would say, and I would encourage anyone that is interested to learning about this, take a look at how Block has been doing this and the people behind FastMCP. There's a bunch of great articles and videos out there online. But their point is you have to start with the outcome in mind. Let's say you have a REST API of 200 endpoints. A lot of MCP developers, because they don't know what they're doing, they're just slapping AI on it. They're like, let's just make 200 MCP tool calls. Well, so your agent now has to search through 200 tools, and it basically exhausts all of its context just to find the tool. And it has not even loaded any data that's relevant for your question yet. And the same thing happens there. Like you have to start to think with the outcome in mind and what are we actually trying to answer? And I think this sort of hits on a principle that we see across the industry, whether it's the semantic layer, whether it's agent harnesses that are now all in the rage. The principle is the same. You have to take a step back, think about what are we trying to achieve and how do we route context in a way that is proper for an agent to be consistent, cheap, and fast.
For me, that comes back to a single source of truth.
Yes.
It's everything that should be routed through one model, SQL transformation on the fly, very old principles. And to argue, I think Looker with LookML created like the first semantic layer in that regard. They were very early with bringing together logic in one place so that you can serve the single source of truth. And what is interesting, this year at Google Cloud Next, they even introduced a LookML agent, which will write the LookML for you. I'm curious how that will play out, because LookML used to be one of my expertises. My whole consulting practice revolved around LookML, creating LookML, writing LookML. So very interesting to see how that plays out, what it will do for a semantic layer, to create a proper semantic layer. But it's also, at the same time, they're not part of the Open Semantic Interchange. So they're choosing their own direction. They are doubling down on LookML, not making it part of the Open Semantic Interchange. What are your thoughts on that? Should it become part of it, or is it their strength that they're not part of the Open Semantic Interchange?
Yeah, so I would like to push back a little bit on how important this is. I think this sort of discussion rings a couple of bells. I mean, if you remember something, a little data forum called Iceberg very recently had a very similar sort of discussion. There was a lot of competing formats, a lot of competing standards, and everyone's focused on the standard. How do we provide an interface that makes sure things go well? It doesn't matter. AI can work with any sort of interface. What I think we have a huge shortage of is proper cognition. If you think about, the internet age, let's say 20 years ago, the big change that we've seen, everyone has access to a bunch of information, but attention has never been worse. And we have seen over time in countless studies that the quality of thought is decreasing, the attention spans are decreasing, logical thinking is decreasing. And I think AI is a very similar vernacular in that. It's basically like a instant gratification button. I have productivity instantly. I have a product instantly. I have something instantly. And then this whole discussion around, which format should we follow, I think misses the point. And, Looker's saying, well, we're creating LookML agents. Does that help you think through the problem and actually build the agent you need? No, it's just a way to create an agent. Who cares?
I think it solves the cold start problem. That is how they say it. If you don't have a semantic layer at all, the LookML agent can help you get started to
Right.
read strategy documents, get some context out of that, to create some basic LookML model.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that, but then my question is, what is your outcome? So I'll tell you, I think this approach and how agents and LLMs are used in practice now a lot are very tantalizing for a very specific type of personality. Someone that wants to be as productive as possible. They want to create products. They want to do it yesterday. And I've been doing this myself too. But I've realized the more I do that, I didn't achieve the impact I wanted. So even with something like this, sure, you can create a base layer, but do you need a sloppy base layer, or do you need to actually work through the hard problems? Like, would you rather have, let me put it differently, would you rather have a small set of LookML files that are really good at providing impact for the business,
I prefer that.
or 1,000 sloppy ones? Nobody cares.
Yep.
We can say, look, AI number go up. We have more tokens spent. We have more lines of code. But at the end of the day, what happens if you do that? Again, we go back to the purpose engineering. Agents have limited context, limited attention.
Mhm.
If I give him a whole set of these, it now gets confused. I have let's say I have 100 LookML files that are not actually really answering a business question. So now I have to sort of go in and explain it and sort of build it out and go back and forth. Oh man, I'm building a semantic layer. You can't get out of that work.
Fair point. I think big part of the work I used to do has to do with writing LookML and validating those metrics. I think the validation part still holds. Someone that understands what's in there needs to have a look at it and be able to have an opinion about it. I think that is super important. But in terms of data consulting, should we move up the ladder, or what is it? What is the impact for data consulting work?
Move up the ladder how? What do you mean?
I mean, in terms of that, this is more of a strategic exercise than writing the code.
Yeah. So if you think about it, any technical profession had a couple layers to providing value. It used to be the implementation layer. You had to get requirements. You had to align it with business value, all whatnot. So I think implementation used to be very expensive. And this is also why we have spent so much time building very extensive frameworks to try to fix for the problem of consistency, quality, and the cost of implementation. Now that has been reduced significantly. So
But that was really good for me. I managed to build out a company based on that and sell it.
yeah, but the question is, is anybody interested in buying that now? Because again, look, if I'm on the other side, I'll just say I'll spin up Claude Code and do an implementation. There's that. So I agree with you. I think it is important to, I guess, moving up the stack is maybe a way to put it, but you have to think differently about how you provide that value. Now, there can still be implementation, but it's different. Like what I was describing before, right? Like if someone is already doing AI and agents, there is a lot of value of coming in and saying, well, how about, did you consider prompt caching? Did you consider these strategies to reduce your input tokens? Did you consider these agent harnesses? That's all implementation level work. The reason why I think that's sort of out of the picture is because everyone still lives in this idea of, if we just keep pushing compute at the problem, it's gonna be better. And to some extent, that has been true from like GPT-3 to GPT-5, right? You've seen big jumps from 3 to 4 when you just threw a lot more compute at it. But if you read closely between the lines of the research, you'll see that ever since GPT-4 or so, that sort of has held up less and less. And we see this also if like the benchmarking, right? The companies like OpenAI and Anthropic did not used to post these benchmarks because they just had such a great increase of throwing raw compute at the problem that it wasn't necessary. Like it was obvious to everyone using it in any use case that it was way better with GPT-4 compared to GPT-3. GPT-5 to 4, it's harder for people, right? And what that shows you, like you've probably seen like the leaks of the Claude code base. There's been a lot of work of companies like Devin that have AI engineering, which is basically a really good developed harness. That is all implementation work.
Yeah.
It's different implementation work. So I would just say, yeah, it's not going to be LookML files, but it's going to be that building that agentic system. That is going to be your implementation level value that you can deliver as a company. And I think there's tons of opportunities still there.
Okay. Should we still go into the code?
Into the code. I think you do. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I think anyone that has any experience with a certain slice of the tech stack, in your case of LookML, how often will you see the output generated by the LM and say, it's good, it's a good start, but maybe we can improve this, maybe we can improve that, maybe we need to scope this down, maybe we need to scope this out. I think you still need to do the importance of doing proper systems design has now increased significantly. But in a way, like, doing proper system design still requires you to understand how the code works. I mean, obviously you can't review hundreds of thousands of lines of code every week, every month, like some people are doing. But you can still look at important choke points, let's say, based on your experience and your knowledge of the field. So yeah, I would still say it's there, but it's less important.
Okay. Let's go into a hot topic then. Nobody in our communities is really open about this, but how should we then price and scope data consulting work?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. And it sort of hits at the core of how do you price for any service that you're providing. I remember very well looking at different ways of pricing, and I came across an artist once that gave a very compelling case. He said, I charge by logo or by project. It was a logo artist. So he would charge, let's say, $5,000 to design a logo. and he could do it in 10 minutes. And then the client said, well, I think that's kind of ridiculous. I'm paying $5,000 for 10 minutes of work. And then he countered saying, well, so what do you want me to do? Like bill you hourly? So now you're penalizing me for being less efficient and sort of running the clock on your end? There's plenty of business models like this. There's plenty of consultants that work like this. There's lawyers that work like this. There's accountancy firms that work like this. This has always been a big part of consultancy pricing. Whether that will stay or not, probably. There's still some companies that prefer to have this. It's just from a purely financial perspective, it's efficient if you need someone like more a long time, but you don't want to have like all the bells and whistles of having an employee.
But the agent will have a large part in the outcome.
Yes.
So how can we? Yeah, if it would be a team member that works on the project from my end, then I know how to price it. But what if the agent does the work? Let's say a LookML agent comes in and solves all the LookML code issues. Can we price on the outcome?
I would say not on that one, because again, we have to consider what is actually a value adding activity in the current day and age. I think fixing bugs and things like that, not so much if the agent can handle it. But that is not the main value you can provide. Again, if we're talking about something like a semantic layer or building an agent harness or building any agentic system, the value you're delivering is building that system of agents to do the job well. And they will do the implementation, yes, but somebody needs to design it. Somebody needs to make it. Somebody needs to make sure it works for the company. And in my opinion, and I think this may be a hot take for some people, it is a mistake to aim for something like AGI in these cases, because just the whole concept of what is general intelligence, what do you mean by this? What is intelligence? What is general intelligence? How can I make something that is going to deal with ambiguity of people and with business as an outcome? And I think this is what you're also seeing sort of implicitly being shown by the big provider companies. They have all these different benchmarks. Why? If you had something that's generally intelligent, we could have one. Why do we need to have 10 or 20? It's because you need to do a lot of engineering work and optimization to optimize for each use case. And I think the same is going to be for a company. Now, what you might be able to do as a consultant, you could build a kick-ass LookML agent, maybe one that's even better than Looker themselves. And you might say, well, is that possible? Yes, it is. Because they are also still learning about this technology, and they're a big organization and they move slow. So there is an opportunity for you to come in and say, I have a better Looker agent harness. I have a better Looker agent maker. And again, there's companies that show this is the case. So I think that will stay, but you need to compete. You need to be really on top of the cutting edge. You need to experiment a lot. You need to put in a lot of time. And I think the uncomfortable truth for a lot of people is, yeah, we have spent like 5, 10, 20 years building certain skills. When it comes on the implementation layer, I feel that, and I've had similar issues. They're still relevant, but less relevant. And it's a hard admission, because it used to be that if I spent 20 years learning to become super, super, super good at the implementation layer of coding, whether that is LookML, whether that is Python as a data engineer, doesn't really matter which technology, I had sort of a moat. I had a skill that was in demand, and it wasn't easy to replace it. We now have all sort of entered a more level playing field. And that is scary to people that have a moat.
I think it's interesting what you just mentioned with the agentic AI, the AGI. You shouldn't be striving for AGI in that regard. So there you also say that it's kind of more a human thing. You still need people to do the work. And in that regard, we see a lot of AI native agencies coming up. AI agencies are people that are by default doing things with AI and are operating more effective because they're doing it with AI. Where do you see AI native agencies going? There's a lot of buzz around it. Like AI native agencies are the winners of the AI age. Is there a specific thing for data engineering, data work in general that should happen with AI native agencies?
It's hard to say. I think we're still in a very early Wild West age. And something I will notice is it's very complicated to discern the understanding and the depth of experience all these different agencies have with AI. And obviously that makes sense. There is an incentive to sell and oversell and oversell. Um, it makes it very difficult to see like who are the strongest players here, because I think it will take some time to uh, get the results. I think with any boom,
Is it a trap in the sense that AI native looks nice from the outside, but the experience that we just discussed is missing? Like they don't have the experience doing it. They can do it because AI can do it.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for these companies. It can definitely work out. I mean, again, if you're consulting a company that's very greenfield, you can get away with practices for a very long time. Let's be honest. I mean, that that is absolutely possible. Will it catch up with you eventually? Who knows? Maybe yes, maybe no. If the current LLMs and the agentic frameworks like and the harnesses like Claude and Codex and all these improve tremendously, who knows? It's very hard to predict something like that. I think the one thing we know for certain is you either move out or double down. It If you are going to stay in tech and you're going to say, well, I'm just going to like dip my toe into AI and not, I'm going to like try to get a hold of it a little bit and understand it a little bit here and there, it's going to be a very, very tough work environment. And I'm seeing this with a lot of consultants around me. Some just decide to do something completely different than tech. They go into sales, they go into customer relationships, they go into plumbing. There's plenty of people I've spoken to that started their plumbing and painter companies. That's a very fair way to go about it. I mean, that there is nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying if you're going to stay in tech, you're going to double down. And, the days of just coasting on the beach are over and working 1 or 2 hours a day. You are going to have to spend a lot of time and effort to stay relevant and compete.
Yeah. Let's go into your type of plumbing. You're writing some very technical articles about the stuff you're doing with DBT, for example. With DBT, how you can use the DBT manifest, for example, to parse that, get insights on governance from that manifest. Is that something you think will disappear because of agentic, or do you still need this level of expertise, this knowledge, to make something nice for the customer?
I think it's less relevant nowadays, and simply for the fact that on the implementation side, there's many ways to solve things, and a lot of these AIs and APIs, SDKs and interfaces have all been built for human developers. And that's all fine and well, but what I've learned with my clients and a lot of other folks is grep works pretty well. You can have an AI just grab through your code base and it will figure out things quite well. You don't need to even use DBT to work with a DBT code base.
Okay. In that regard, how do you figure out with a new client if they have a real semantic layer or not? Because in a lot of cases, they might have DBT cube or something installed. They figure that they have a semantic layer.
Mm.
How do you check? How do you test if that is a real thing?
So I will say, the way I look at it is every company has a semantic layer. Every company has a semantic layer, but they look different. You might have a small company that has 60 tables in a Postgres database, and there might be some tribal knowledge on how you should work with that. That, in a way, is a semantic layer. There may be some simple queries they have that they give to an agent. Let's say you connected up with Slack or Teams or whatnot. That is already a basic semantic layer. And for that company, that might be enough. Their data is not complicated enough yet to warrant doing anything more than that. Whereas there might be enterprises that have, thousands of tables and views in their data warehouse, and they have nothing in that sense. But then I'll ask you something. We've spent, years and years building dashboards and data assets and all these things. A dashboard, in a way, is a semantic layer because if you look at the OSI definition, there are components like we have verified queries. There is a business question, and there is a verified sequencer to answer it. A dashboard is a verified query bear because there was a business user, they had a question, an analyst took up a ticket, they spent some time building it out, they presented a dashboard, and the business user told them this is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of
kind of
companies
agree.
have this.
Yeah, I kind of agree on that. I think you have a lot of logic in there that you could already extract from it.
Yeah.
That is an interesting starting point. I think the LookML agent, by the way, also kind of says that it works like that.
Yeah.
So very interesting. But outside of this context that we're describing here, like the semantic layer, you have this concept that Google also introduced, the knowledge catalog, if I'm correct. And this is like a universal data catalog throughout the business. So outside of the data warehouse, also interacting with applications or storage that might live elsewhere, they're creating this knowledge catalog. Do you think that will form like a new line of work for data people, or is this something that is too big for a data team?
I think that's a very interesting point you raise. I think that data professionals are especially well equipped to produce systems like this because they are already very used to dealing with vague business requirements and translating it to usable metrics. And I think that translation skill is something that, if you look at, let's say, traditional software engineering, especially with bigger companies, usually how this happens is you'll have some executives, they'll have a strategic direction. There will be an army of product managers that sort of translate that into, okay, this is sort of the product we're going to build, the user stories, as they would say in software land. And then, software engineers would come in and start implementing this. And I think in the data world, that sort of thing has always been more vague because the requests themselves have always been vaguer. So it was a lot harder to assess what does somebody actually want? What is actually important? And oftentimes the initial request is very far apart from how the question should actually be answered. And I think we sort of have like that muscle memory through that exercise and a way of looking at problems. And this is what I'm very much noticing is if I go into data communities like, for example, the Day-to-Day Texas, there's a lot of talk about semantic layers and ontologies. If I go to a software engineer heavy AI meetup, I hear nothing about this because they're not used to thinking about problems like that. They'll think more about an agent harness, like how do we route requests, which model we use, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They are actually two things that hit on the same fundamental problem, but they have a slightly different way of breaking down the problem and approaching it. So I think in that sense, the data people are the best suited to help do this work. And I think it's going to be as relevant, maybe even more relevant than what software engineering is coming up with. Data people might be coming for software engineers there. So I think there's because if you think about it, like implementation was their biggest moat.
Yeah.
That's gone.
What if all this cool stuff plays out well? If all the agentic stuff works and it just happens, what part of your job will disappear, and what will become the most valuable of your job?
Yeah, I mean, again, what will disappear? Things like writing a DBT model by hand, a LookML file, a data orchestration pipeline in Prefect or Dexter, or all these things. That will most certainly be very much deprioritized and not. It's not going to raise a lot of interest from the business. What will be the value? I think Pete Steiberger from OpenClaw had a good point. It's going to be taste when it comes to systems design thinking. Somebody still has to think the system through. It's the semantic layer. It's the agent harness. but it's also going to be domain knowledge. I think that's the other big component that's not going to go away. And you might say, well, stakeholders have the business knowledge. Not entirely, because again, we've done this exercise of translating these very vague requests into something more actionable and useful. That is sort of a industry semantic layer in people's brain, right? Like that knowledge and know-how of how to work with that. You may be able to encode that eventually in all kinds of specialized agents. That's true. But there will be still new requests. Again, I think it sort of boils down to, do you expect when needs are met, that demand is going to go up, down, or stay flat? And from every single instance of technology in the last 40 years, from what I've seen, the answer is usually demand goes up. We want more. This is awesome. We fixed this. On to the next thing. On to the next product. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build value as companies and as society. So there is always going to be a need for that. I think that argument that you're describing sort of describes this world where we think that agents are going to reach like optimum. They're going to be like the best at everything, and there's going to be no way possible to do things better than how they're doing it. I'm very hard pressed to believe we're going to achieve something like that anytime soon.
Have you seen them failing in production in that regard?
Plenty times, plenty times, and this is like the marketing versus reality of building AI agents. So many times, because again, it is amazing what LLMs could do, but they have fundamental shortcomings, and just one of them is non-determinism. It's a very difficult thing to work with, especially if you work in the line of data where it has to be the same answer 100% of the time. I don't want profit to be $1 million today and $20,000 tomorrow. That is not correct. So that is something that is inherent into LLMs, very hard to work out. Again, cost is a big thing. We are now living in a very subsidized era of AI. Anyone that has used, let's say, a Claude Max plan or the equivalent of that in ChatGPT, you pay $200 a month and you get tons of usage. Well, if you actually track the API costs that would have incurred, it's somewhere around $5,000 to $10,000 per person for a $200 subscription. Now, that is obviously untenable. Like, no company can keep funding that way. So there has to be at some point a reckoning of that. And I think a lot of people expect prices are going to increase steeply. I don't think necessarily that's the most likely outcome. What I think is we're going to see much more aggressive routing in the back of these providers. Let's say, here's a perfect example. Like, I had a project for a client who were moving over all of their data assets from one BI platform to another. So we had collected all the metadata, like all the dashboards and all the usage, all the fields, all the figures, all of this. We built a whole pipeline to lift it over. And you would say, well, okay, I can just do 50 agents in parallel, and there's independent sessions, and they're just going to all work fine. They have 1 million context. I'm putting in 200,000 of context. No problem. It was a problem. I will look back and I would see, actually, it started failing at some point, and not failing in the sense that it wouldn't produce compiled code. It would just have bad answers, like incorrect SQL. It would hallucinate. And something that also Anthropic very funnily announced around the time I was trying this experiment is that they noticed that their models were experiencing context anxiety, which means that essentially what they were seeing, and this is what I've seen implementing with my clients as well, is if the LLM thinks it's approaching its context limit, it freaks out and sort of like takes a shortcut, so it does never fill up the context. Funny thing is, they don't know their own context limits. So this is non-determinism, right? This might happen at 50,000 tokens or 500,000 tokens. I noticed that if there's a sudden increase in rate of token consumption, it might infer this and sort of panic and try to project it out and try to be smart about it and sort of, work around this limitation. And these are things that are very hard to track until you start to push agentic work to its limit. And I have plenty of these things that I found with my clients, and this is still some active engineering works from the labs, but also from the companies implementing them. And it's a constant learning curve. It's very hard to read up on these things at all times, because sometimes even the labs might not notice until later. And you won't find out until you actually start pushing the button and doing tons of agents in production.
Okay. I have a final question. This is more on MCPs. So Looker as an MCP now, Google managed MCP, dbt as an MCP, Snowflake has core text code.
Yeah.
If they are all shipping the same protocols, is that commoditizing the intelligence or the integration layer that we're working on?
What do you mean by integration layer here?
We're integrating with, we used to do work on dbt, we used to do work on LookML, but they all have this MCP now. Does this commoditize our work?
Well, I'll ask a simple question. Do you think you can just throw all those MCPs, let's say 10 out of them, all in one session and it will give you the right answer?
Nope.
There you go. There's some work to do.
So I have a couple of picks for you, some takes, your take on it, you can choose, but we can discuss later. dbt Cloud or dbt Core for a Series A startup with no data engineer?
Ooh. I would definitely say dbt Cloud if you don't have any data engineers.
Okay. Knowledge catalog or open semantic interchange?
Same to me.
Okay. The most overrated tool in the modern data stack?
Oh. That's a good one. That's a hard question. I think I'm just gonna say it. It's BI tools.
Okay. And what's the most underrated?
The most underrated. Honestly, I can't think of any.
Okay. One thing in your book that will get you yelled at on LinkedIn?
Oh man. I think the one thing that people are probably gonna say, come on, what's that gonna help me? Is I make the argument that people have to think very long term when it comes to their relationships and their sales pipeline. And that may be a tough pill to swallow if you want to make sales today.
Cool. And do you think there will be a job like a truth architect in 3 years' time?
A true architect. Will we get a ministry of truth as well? Yes, maybe. It's a good question. I mean, I would say that's a data analyst, but yeah, sure. If that's what people want to call it, then yeah, totally.
Okay. Last question. Imagine it's 2028. The open semantic interchange is successful. Semantic layers are implemented. Where's the data industry heading?
I don't think anyone knows. I'm very excited to see where it will go.
What will be your business model in that world?
My business model. It is building proper agentic frameworks, harnesses, semantic layers to make sure that no matter what business you're running, enterprise, startup, finance, healthcare, it will run consistently, fast, and cheaply.
Interesting. I think this is where we land. I think we discussed a lot about how the semantic layer will impact business, and how we can be of value for businesses and companies that we work with. I think there's still a lot of work to do in that regard. I think the industry and the tools out there will crystallize out, but the principles will remain. We need to help our customers to the best extent, and that will remain. We will maintain these relationships.
I'm very excited for what is to come, and I will just say it's going to be a very interesting competition to see who ends up on top in this race. And I would like to thank you for inviting me. I think this is a great conversation. It's always good to catch up with you and back here in hometown Amsterdam. And yeah, uh, yeah,
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for being a guest.
thank you.